Welcome back, everybody, to the PFF NFL show and Super Bowl week, as we are here to preview as in-depthly as we possibly can the matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman. This is going to be a fun show, Dalton. I think that we're gonna dive deeper into these teams, the matchups, the schemes, the certain strengths and weaknesses of these teams, more than we ever have for any matchup this entire season. So I think that it's a great way to sort of encapsulate what the season has been, really try to flex our PFF data muscles here as we really dig into exactly what we think is going to happen in this game and how each team might be able to take advantage of the other. How you doing, my friend?
We're good. It feels like it's going to be a really fun matchup, obviously, between two teams that have certainly earned their way here through different paths and have, different really winding roads of getting here, even starting last offseason. But it also feels a little weird. It's going to be the last game preview we do for over 6 months. So the last one here, let's make it a fun one.
I know we've already turned the page a little bit towards draft season, so we've started to get the draft season swing going on here in this channel. But you're right, one last preview, one last review, and then in between, just so everybody knows, we're doing a Super Bowl watch along on Sunday. So if you want to come hang out with us while we're all watching the big game, you get to hear our live commentary and reactions, and we get to go back and forth with you guys in the chat. So on Sunday for the big game itself, we would love for you guys to hang out with us. So let's dive into it. Like we have throughout the playoffs, because it's less game that we're analyzing, we've got more time to sort of dive deep. And obviously that's no truer than when you only have one game to worry about and focus on. So we'll each take each phase of the game. We'll each talk about the Patriots run game, the Patriots pass game, the Seahawks run game, the Seahawks pass game, and then, of course, how each defense is going to match up against them. So let's start with the run game here for the New England Patriots. And I think there's a lot of details to get to. Obviously, it's a new offensive line, a changed offensive line from what it was when this team won 4 games last year. They've got new running backs, or at least rejuvenated running backs in Ramondre Stevenson and a new one in Travion Henderson. You throw in Drake May's ability to pick up yards on the ground, which we saw meant a lot in that game in Denver, which got them here. Where do you want to start? Where does your mind go to when you've been looking at all sorts of film and data and tendencies and all that kinds of stuff with how the Patriots do things? What are you expecting to see from them against the Seahawks, and how effective do you think that's going to be?
Look, they're going to have to get better push up front than they've gotten in this postseason. Drake May's scrambling ability has really been their best asset when it comes to running the football. But when you look at design runs for New England in these first 3 playoff games, it has not been good. Just a 61.8 rushing grade, 3 yards flat per carry, and a 5.6% explosive run rate. Just for context on that last number, if that were stretched across an entire season, that would be the worst mark in the NFL. They really haven't done a great job of creating explosive runs. Stevenson and Henderson in these 3 games have only combined for 5 explosive runs. I think they need to get more out of Travion Henderson. He only played 4 snaps in the AFC title game against Denver. And another thing I think too is that Josh McDaniels has gotten a little more predictable when it comes to the personnel and the play calling when he's going to run the football, right? Basically in the postseason right now, and it was a little more of a mix in the regular season, but right now, if you see the fullback Jack Westover, or if you see Austin Hooper, the second tight end in there, they're going to run the football. It's gotten a little bit more predictable. I know they've been in these tight-knit defensive games against the Chargers and the Texans and Denver. They've really allowed their defense to win and played complementary football on offense, but you have to find a way to create explosive runs against a Seattle unit that ranks 3rd in the NFL in run defense grade. They're 1st in yards per carry allowed, and they allow easily the lowest explosive run rate in the NFL. If it's me, I'm trying to get Travion Henderson more involved. You're not going to get consistently a ton of creases against a very fast, very good tackling Seattle defense. You need a couple of home runs in this run game. I would use Henderson a little bit more. Obviously, you're going to need Stevenson to grind out 3 and 4 and 5 yards at a time, but the Patriots have to be a little bit less predictable and more effective getting downhill and creating explosive runs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that their inability to run between the tackles has been really tough for them in the postseason. When you look at the last month of the regular season for the Patriots, they had an 88.3 team rushing grade between the tackles on more of those man run blocking concepts where you're really like, it's a lot of duo, it's a lot of downhill stuff. They're really just trying to bully you up front, and they were really good at it in the last month of the season with that 88.3 rushing grade. But in the playoffs, that's gone down a whole 20 points. It's just a 68.3. And sure, that's a little bit better than average, because remember, like, average or neutral, if you will, is I shouldn't use the word average. I should use the word neutral, is right around a 60. Like, that's sort of a, hey, you did your job. You didn't go above and beyond. You didn't create all sorts of running room, that kinds of stuff. So it's a little bit better than neutral, but it's not the impact run game that it was at the back half of the season. I think a lot of people are looking at TreVeyon Henderson in this game as a major X factor, because when you look at the last 2 months, so take the last month of the regular season and then what we have seen through the postseason as well, Stevenson, 4.4 yards after contact average, 0.26 missed tackles forced per attempt, which is a great average, because for context, Bijan Robinson had the highest missed tackles forced per attempt average at a 0.29. So Ramondre Stevenson over the last 2 months is 0.26. That's really good. That's about as good as it gets in the NFL. But then TreVeyon Henderson on the flip side, just 2.4 yards after contact average in this 2 month span. So a whole 2 yards less after contact, and then just a 0.12 missed tackles forced per attempt average. It just has not been there for Henderson. And throughout, I think, the beginning and the middle parts of the season, we saw it in flashes with him being a big explosive run guy. But to me, that's a big reason why, like you were talking about, they're just so void of those big time runs. They had 15 in their final 4 games of the regular season. They've got 5 all playoffs between both of their backs. And so, I think it's an interesting point that you brought up of having a fullback in there, because I do want to give Josh McDaniels some credit. You've talked about them being a little bit predictable with just running the football in general. However, I remember pointing this out just a couple of weeks ago, how normally when you have a fullback in there, whether you're from like an I formation or an offset I, something like that, you're running power, right? A lot of times when you have that fullback, you're trying to get him a full head of steam. You're trying to go between the tackles. You're trying to pick up a linebacker or one of the defensive linemen that may get left unblocked because the offensive line is shifting or moving one way or the other. But to the Patriots' credit, they've been putting those fullbacks or tight ends in those backfield formations and then running outside zone. And then actually, trying to get outside of the tackles with that player being the lead blocker for you. And so I will at least give him that credit to where I feel like they do have a diverse run game from those formations, but I think it all really stems from the fact that over the last month, they have not been able to do what they've wanted to do, which is really just push people up front. And it does, like you mentioned, some of the stats that you mentioned, it does not get any easier against the Seattle Seahawks. And so, I think that the Super Bowl, especially for an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels, who, dude, I think this is his 10th? I think this is his 10th Super Bowl where he is the offensive coordinator, which is an insane amount of experience. He kind of knows that you have to call some things that you haven't either lately or at all throughout the season. Like, you've got to be able to go to things that the other team is not going to be able to expect because you haven't put any film out there on it this season. So if there's anybody that has the ability to really switch it up and give a really stout Seahawks front something that they haven't seen before, I do feel like this is the offensive coordinator to be able to do it. So I do think that TreVeyon Henderson is that X factor, and it's going to come down to him being put in positions where he's got to make these big plays that maybe Ramondre Stevenson can't or hasn't, and he's got to come up big, because outside of that, it's going to be tough to see them keeping up with the Seahawks offense, which obviously we'll talk about a little bit more in a couple minutes.
I do wonder if the answer is to not go so heavy and try to run out of lighter, more spread formations, because the Seahawks, they're not going to match personnel with you when you go heavy. They're going to leave Nicky Manwari in there as the third linebacker, and that's essentially their answer. So I wonder if you try to get into 11 personnel and more spread out formations and just try to create space in the front and see if Henderson and Stevenson can find space instead of trying to outnumber them, right? If you put 2 tight ends and a fullback on the field, Seattle's not really going to answer with, okay, here's a true third linebacker, here's a 5th defensive lineman. That's not really their style. They stay with, on paper, it's in nickel with Emanwari on the field, but that's really their base defense. Mike McDonald has talked about this. They're a 4-3 defense with just a crazy athletic Sam and Nicky Manwari. So personnel might not be the answer when it comes to getting heavier. Maybe they have to get lighter and try to spread those guys out a little bit at the second level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's absolutely something to monitor. And to be honest with you, I think that's a really good segue into our game plan of the week, presented by our friends over at Western and Southern. A game plan for your financial future. I think that what you just said there is a great game plan for the Patriots, because and we all look at that number, that 45 and a half over under line. And a lot of us, even though that's the lowest over under total for a Super Bowl in the last decade, a lot of people, you and I have talked about this a little bit over the last week, like that under number, because we just think that these defenses are really good. There's not going to be a lot of explosives in this game. And I think that both of these teams are going to want to run the football, but the Patriots aren't going to have that luxury if they're not effective and explosive with it. So what they do, maybe from running from lighter boxes, or I would say lighter blockers is the better way to say it, could be the game plan that maybe the Seahawks aren't expecting, and it might give them a couple of big runs in this game. Just like every team win starts with a great game plan, your future should as well. With life insurance built like a championship roster, Western and Southern helps protect you and your family, so you can focus on winning today, knowing that tomorrow is covered. Whether you are just starting out, building your dynasty, or looking to lock in long-term protection, their coverage options are designed to match your game plan. Visit westernsouthern.com/PFF to get your free life quote and start building your financial game plan today. Western and Southern, built to win, backed by over 130 years of helping people protect what matters most. So let's get into the Patriots pass game then. I don't think that we are surprising anybody by saying that Drake May has struggled this postseason. I think that's been a big talking point over the last 2 weeks leading up to this game. He had a PFF passing grade of in the 40s, 44.7, I believe, was that number for him throughout this postseason over these 3 games. And I think it's a lack of big time throws, which I'll get to a little bit more in a second. But I'm very curious, what's your thoughts overall on the Patriots passing game? Because in theory, Dalton, it's very diverse. You've got a handful of wide receivers you've got a lot of confidence in. You've got one wide receiver in Stephon Diggs that just seems to play his best when the lights are brightest. You've got 2 tight ends you feel pretty good about. You do have those weapons out of the backfield from your running backs that you feel comfortable getting involved in the passing game as well. And then you have a quarterback that has the ability to make all the throws that you want him to make. So what's your thoughts overall on this Patriots passing offense? Do you think it's bound for a bounce back, or do you think it's going to be tough going up against a really good Seahawks secondary here?
I think Drake May is going to need to see the field well and make some really brave throws into especially zone coverages. So Drake May, when you look at the entirety of the season, including the regular season, he has the highest passing grade in the NFL when defenses rotate their safeties, when they're running coverage rotations on the back end, right? Leads the NFL in yards per attempt when there's a rotated coverage in front of him, leads the NFL in adjusted completion rate, and 16 big-time throws is tied for second behind Matthew Stafford, okay? So when you look at what Drake May is going to need to do against a Mike Macdonald-led defense that rotates their coverages a lot pre-snap, second most rotated coverages in the NFL, they're top 2 in basically every coverage category, including coverage grade, the most forced incompletions in the league when they rotate their safeties and really change the look on you after the snap. That's what Drake May is going to need to see. A lot of the spotlight is going to be on Josh McDaniels versus Mike Macdonald and the play calling, but post-snap, Drake May is going to have to see the field, and the one thing that I think he should do is watch that Rams tape, especially the last 2 games when Matthew Stafford really attacked this defense. You're going to have to make tight window throws over athletic linebackers, in front of smart safeties, a talented group of cornerbacks. I think Drake May needs to see the field well. Play action would help him a lot. He's been better with play action in the postseason. If you can get those linebackers to just create a little more space for you with the threat of the run game in the middle of the field, that can really help him. Seam routes, deep in cuts, taking shots down the sideline when they're there. He's going to have to make, I think, 3 or 4 big-time throws to win this game, but I think a lot of them are going to have to come with Mike Macdonald messing with his eyes post-snap. The disguise coverages and the safety movement are the biggest things I'm looking for when New England is trying to throw the football.
Yeah, I think that one word that you used in the opening sentence that you had there before you got into some of the data is you used the word brave. You said Drake May is going to have to make some brave throws in this game, and I agree completely. I think that's the word that you have to use, and I think that there have been, I don't mean this to be like overly critical of him, but there have been a bit less of those in the playoffs, and I think that's why you see some of the lower passing grades for him. It's not like he's got a ton of turnover-worthy plays. I mean, if you take away the fumbles throughout this postseason, he doesn't have a ton of turnover-worthy plays just passing the football. The fumbles have not helped him throughout the last 3 games, but obviously we account for those as turnover-worthy plays because they are, and a lot of times that they are on the quarterback. Sometimes they're on the offensive line, but that's a little bit of a deeper discussion for another day. But when I looked into how Drake May is playing against certain coverages, I sort of found a little bit of the same data that you were talking about, but he was much better in the regular season at those things than he has been in the postseason, which the postseason, let's also admit this, very good defenses that he has gone up against. Jesse Minter, D'Amico Ryans, Vance Joseph, these are some of the best defenses in the NFL. Obviously, it doesn't get any easier this week, but Drake May's passing grade versus specific coverages these playoffs: 78.0 against cover 1 and a 73.4 against cover 3. So when there is a single high safety, whether it's a pre-snap or a post-snap rotation, when there is a single high safety, he normally sees it pretty well, and he's able to attack that. Against quarters coverage, 49.2 passing grade, and against some form of cover 6, whether it's to the left or to the right, 61.7 PFF passing grade. Specifically, that's interesting for this matchup because the Seahawks play cover 6 or quarters, those two coverage shells that May struggled with the most. They play that 63.3% of the time, and they have done that throughout the postseason. That's their number throughout the playoffs. They play with a single high in cover 1 or cover 3, just 35.7. So Drake May, the majority of the time, about 2/3 of the time, is going to see those coverage shells that he has struggled with this postseason. Now, I go back to something that I said about it in the beginning. When I say that Drake May has struggled, it's not that you look at how he has performed versus quarters or cover 6 and you see all these turnover-worthy plays as a passer. Dalton, the difference, though, is that he's got 0 big-time throws against those coverage shells, and specifically, his time to throw is 3.15 as an average against those coverage shells, and when you look at what it's like versus single high, so much faster. I think it's closer to like 2.5 against single high coverage shells. So it's just where he's not making a ton of mistakes to really ding his passing grade. He's not attempting those, again, the word that you used, brave throws. And he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to attempt them, and he's going to have to complete them to beat a really, really good Seattle defense, specifically in their coverage. We've seen their coverage players on the back end play with a ton of confidence throughout this postseason. I think they're going to continue to do that, and it's going to be up to May to hit a good amount of those tight window throws to be able to move the ball through the air. So unfortunately, you and I talked about this a little bit when we were at the Senior Bowl as well, just chatting about this game. Zone coverage also plays into the Seahawks' hands of how they will defend Drake May with his legs too, because something that we talked about as a point of emphasis for the Patriots and Broncos game was how much the Broncos play man coverage. I believe it's more than any team in the NFL at a higher percentage, or at least it's top 3. So when you're playing man coverage, a lot of times defenders have their back to the ball. They have their back to the quarterback. They can't see him. So that gives quarterbacks the opportunity to take off and run. For the Seahawks, they're playing those zone coverage shells. Now, some of them obviously are, turn into man match principles and things like that. But a lot of times just you have these players that can play in these zones while having their eyes on the quarterback. And you got a ton of speed. Ernest Jones, Nicky Manwari, Devon Witherspoon, all those guys have a ton of speed on the field to be able to cut off Drake May if he escapes the pocket and he looks to tuck it and run. What Seattle does from a frequency standpoint and from an effectiveness and an impact standpoint, unfortunately, go right into what has frustrated the Patriots passing attack the most this playoffs. So if the Patriots are going to totally flip the script, it is going to look much different than how they have executed against this type of coverage throughout the first 3 weeks of the playoffs.
I think in general, a big theme for the Patriots offense in both aspects is how are they going to create explosive plays, right? Because Seattle, they allow the lowest explosive run rate in the league and the third lowest explosive pass rate in the league. And I think we'll get to Seattle's offense in a minute. A big factor could be those two high coverages, and how do you prevent these two quarterbacks from completing the deep ball? Drake May and Sam Darnold are 3rd and 4th respectively in deep deep passing grade this season. These are offenses that want to get vertical. They want to attack down the field. How do these two defenses prevent that? I think especially on the New England side with the struggles of their offense in these 3 postseason games, run or pass, the theme is going to be how do you create an explosive play against a team that is better than anybody in the league at preventing them.
Yep, I think that's a major talking point, and it's Patriots fans outside of Drake May just looking like an absolute stud, which he has the ability to do. It's hard to schematically and from a tendency perspective look at this and say, yeah, you feel good about the Patriots being able to do that, because I do agree with you, and we'll get into Seattle's side of things, setting the tone early in this game in a couple of minutes, but I think the demand will be there for May to have to kind of win this with his arm in some big moments in this game. Can he do that? Because if he does that, man, he will be checking a major box that it feels like he was not able to do at this point throughout the postseason. We've obviously got one more game to go. It's a big one. It's also one of the most bet games of any sporting event every single year. So that means that the PFF player prop tool is going to be your best friend. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, you absolutely have to. Let's see it.
Everyone's got takes. Numbers have truth. And the truth is, most people are betting with emotion. Sportsbooks feed on it. TikTok gurus sell it. The hype machine runs on it. That's how you lose. PFF is different. You're betting with winning data. The same data trusted by all 32 NFL teams and the sharpest minds in the game. PFF betting tools take every prop, every matchup, every angle, and run them through our custom models. Built on the best football data in the world. What comes back is your edge. Simple, sharp, and built to win. Want to go deeper? PFF puts a pro-level analytics department in your hands, giving you the same insights teams use to find every advantage. Build your game plan with matchup analysis. Project every snap, every matchup, and every edge before kickoff, because the smartest plays start long before Sunday. Hit rates show how a player performs against their prop and against defenses built the same way. It's the data that gives you real confidence in every pick. Next, Key Insights translates PFF data into the story behind every matchup, giving you the why that powers your bets. From coverage schemes to defensive looks, it's the context that turns raw numbers into winning decisions. When you're ready to take action, filter through every prop on the market and focus on the opportunities that matter, by game, matchup, or value. Then, shop for the best available line in your area and tap your book of choice to place the bet instantly. Everyone's got takes, but now you've got truth. Bet with data, win with PFF.
You guys can see the player prop tool and so much more if you have a PFF Plus subscription. Subscribe.pff.com is the best way to get that. So if you're placing some bets for the big game, make sure that you have PFF Plus and you have the player prop tool to help you out. Dalton, we'll move on to the Seahawks side of things. And just like we did with the Patriots, let's start with the run game here. Kenneth Walker has been, it feels like a man possessed over the last 2 months of the season. He's been playing very, very well here for them. No Zach Charbonnet in this game, so he is also graded really well, especially as of late over the last 2 months, but we won't have him in this game due to injury. How much does that affect things? What are you looking at with Kenneth Walker? What do you think about the Seattle Seahawks run game overall?
I think it obviously affects things a little bit because Walker is going to have to be the workhorse in this game as he's been for the last couple in the postseason. But I think the big strength-on-strength battle here for me is Seattle's ability to run between the tackles. They don't really run to the outside very well. They don't turn the corner very often. They use those zone schemes to allow Kenneth Walker to cut back in between the tackles and really force defenses to show their hand and over pursue to the football, right? So when you look at Seattle running between the tackles, they have the best rushing grade in football, 91.1 rushing grade. 4.8 yards per carry is 7th in the league, and 12% explosive run rate is the second best in the NFL. But New England, we've talked before earlier in the playoffs about some of their struggles to defend on the outside run game. Between the tackles, they're outstanding. Actually, the lowest yards per carry and explosive run rate allowed in the league this season between the tackles, 3.7 yards per carry. So when you look at the interior, and I'm going to talk about this in the pass game a lot too, but the interior of this New England defense, Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, Kyrus Tonga on the inside of the defensive line. Robert Spillane is a guy who I'm really focused on, because if there's one injured guy to watch throughout this week and make sure, his status is okay for the game if you're New England, it's Robert Spillane. The impact that he has on this defense in the middle, he's really the glue that holds this front seven together in run defense. Trev, over the last 4 years, the only two linebackers with a better run defense grade than Robert Spillane. If you want to guess him, if you want to guess him, you can. It's not hard.
Okay, it's the only two linebackers with a better run defense grade than Spillane?
Over the last 4 years, yes.
Oh, 4 years. Is Bobby Wagner one of them?
Yep.
Okay, Bobby Wagner's one of them. Is the other one obvious? Is it Fred Warner?
Yes. Bobby Wagner, Fred Warner, Robert Spillane. And you can see the impact. There was a stretch late in the season, the last 5 weeks or so of the season, that Spillane was hurt. This year, when Robert Spillane is on the field, New England has a team run defense grade of 69.6, and they only allow 3.5 yards per carry, and it's even lower than that between the tackles. When he's not on the field, that goes down to 55.3 on the run defense grade and 4.4 yards per carry. When Spillane is not on the field, they're basically a bottom 8 run defense, and when he's on the field, they're a top 5 run defense. That's how much a difference he makes. He's the only starting player in their front seven with a run defense grade above 70. Their secondary, the safeties, Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson especially, do a great job of coming down and supporting, but Robert Spillane is the glue that holds this whole thing together in run defense. If he's either not 100% and playing or he doesn't play at all, I think that works seriously to the advantage of Seattle, because that's the battle that's going to happen between the tackles. How many explosive runs can Kenneth Walker rip off between the tackles? And if Spillane is healthy and New England can stop them and make Seattle one-dimensional, then they put him in bad third down situations.
I do agree with you that between the tackles is paramount for the Seahawks in their run game. However, I'm about to talk about a different run formation that the Seahawks have performed very well at that I think could be key in this game. But first, I want to give Kenneth Walker his flowers. Over the last 2 months, so if you take the last 4 games of the regular season and then their journey throughout the playoffs here, Kenneth Walker has a 5.0 yards per carry average. Yeah, that'll do, I think, during the clutch parts of the regular season and then getting into the postseason. That's pretty incredible. He has had an explosive run of 10 or more yards in every week since week 15, which has been so clutch for them. 0.28 missed tackles forced per attempt average over the last 2 months as well. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, the highest season average for any running back this season was Bijan Robinson at a 0.29. So Kenneth Walker at a 0.28, that just tells you how good and how effective he has been. I agree, the Seahawks want to win between the tackles when it comes to their run game. However, we're able to look at, all run blocking concepts. And there is specifically, Dalton, one that really stands out to me over the last 2 months, but then also in the playoffs, that the Seahawks don't run a ton of, but it's been really, really effective. And that is those pull lead plays. So you're pulling one or more of your offensive linemen out to where the sideline is, and you're trying to obviously get the whole play to flow to the sideline. You're trying to beat defenders to a certain spot to be able to wall them off so the running back can get up the sideline and really take off down the field. Specifically, I want you to guess, left or right side, which side of the offensive line do you think that Seattle does pull lead the most?
I'm gonna go left side because Charles Cross is their best offensive lineman. I'm gonna say they get behind Charles Cross.
They get behind Charles Cross, but actually, more importantly, they get behind Gray Zabel, who has an elite 92.5 PFF run blocking grade over the last 2 months when he has been involved in those pull lead plays. The reason why they're so effective, and they don't run them a ton, but when they do, they have been effective at an elite rate because they trust Zabel to either be a puller to get around the tackle or the defenders and get to where he needs to, or I even noticed during the times that they did run to the right, which they didn't run to the right nearly as much as they ran to the left, but on those times where they run to the right, they trust him to explode out of his stance, get to the second level, and wall off one of the linebackers so they can't flow towards where the play and the ball is going. You mentioned Charles Cross, also a big part of why they run to the left. Josh Jones also was really good for them when he was in there at left tackle when Charles Cross was not. They trusted those athletes on the left side of the line of scrimmage, and they don't do it a ton. So I don't think that we're going to see a ton of plays where they do that, because a lot of times they want to set it up through, like what you talked about, running between the tackles, really being bullies up front, but then they want to switch it up and be able to run, pull lead to the left with their athlete offensive linemen in Charles Cross and Gray Zabel, and they've been able to do that at a very, very effective rate. So I do agree with you that most of this game comes down to how effective and powerful they are in the downhill run game, letting Kenneth Walker sort of be as light on his feet as he is, be able to hit those cutback lanes, be able to make guys miss in a phone booth and get up the field. But there's also going to be a handful of times this game where they run that pull lead to the left, and it's been devastating, and teams have not been ready for it because of the athletes that they have on the offensive line. And I bet you we see some of those plays, and I bet those might be some huge plays for first downs, for chunk gains, for explosive gains, whatever you want to call it. But I noticed that, and then I went and watched the film of all of their plays where they've run pull lead over the last 2 months, and I think it's a big reason why is because of Gray Zabel.
I think those pin pulls could be useful a handful of times, too, because New England's linebackers, including Spillane, they're really, really good downhill, among the best groups in the NFL between the tackles and getting downhill, but they don't have the most speed in the world, right? So if you can make them move sideline to sideline, and that's why New England isn't quite as good defending the edges in the run game as they are between the tackles, you got to make those linebackers run laterally. If you can do that, I think you're at an advantage. So to sprinkle in that curveball of those pin pull concepts, especially getting Zabel out on the edge, right, or on the second level, that's the appeal to him, is athleticism, and that's what Clint Kubiak always wanted in his offensive line, is athleticism and the ability to move laterally. I think that could be a big asset for him when they're looking for that changeup.
We'll get to the Seahawks passing game here in a second, but this PFF betting segment brought to you by our friends over at DraftKings. We've talked about it earlier in the show. The amount of ways that you could bet on this game are infinite. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook for live betting, they're making every snap, every drive, and every moment of the Super Bowl count with DraftKings Live Millions, featuring over $5 million in prizes just for live betting. Here's how simple it is. Head to DraftKings Sportsbook app, opt in, and receive a promo token. Place a live bet of $1 or more on the Super Bowl, and you're automatically entered. That's it. Every live bet means another shot to win. Place a live bet and stack your entries all Sunday long. Once the game wraps, they'll randomly select their prize winners. There'll be more than 100,000 winners. The question is, will you be one of them? Jump in, bet live, let the entries roll for a shot at a share of over $5 million in prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the promo code PFF. This promo code PFF. Bet live for your share of $5 million in prizes with the promo code PFF. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois, 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. No purchase necessary. Opt-in required. Minimum odds, minus 500. Prizes either bonus bets or single-use 20% profit bonus. Max bet $20 that expire within 30 days. See official rules for entry period and free method of entry. Sponsored by Crown Gaming Incorporated. Seahawks pass game. Sam Darnold. Does he exercise the demons for good? Is he no longer seeing ghosts? Is that phrase about to be a phrase of the past? May we never utter it again if he has a great game and obviously captures a Super Bowl here. Dalton, what do you think we're seeing from Clint Kubiak, from Sam Darnold, and from the Seahawks passing game?
Well, he's going to see some He's going to see some demons in that Patriots interior defensive line. When you talk about Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, Kyrus Tonga, Corey Durden, who's really come on in the postseason, 13 pressures in 3 postseason games. You look at this crew right here, and they have combined. The Patriots interior defensive line this year has combined for the second best pass rush grade, the second highest pressure rate, and they are first in pass rush win rate. The highest pass pass rush win rate in the NFL of any group of defensive tackles. Contrast that with the Seahawks interior offensive line, an extremely young group. You mentioned Gray Zabel at left guard before. Jalen Sundell at center, the second-year man. Anthony Bradford at right guard has really struggled in pass protection this year. Their interior offensive line has the third worst pass blocking grade in the league, and they have allowed their 20th when it comes to pressure rate allowed in the league. I think there's two things with this. One is New England just has so much talent, right? There's a reason they're paying a guy like Milton Williams $26 million a year, and he's been outstanding this season. But also what they do schematically, and we're going to have a film breakdown up on the channel about this, what they do schematically to isolate guards and disallow the center from helping and New England's really good at creating those one-on-one matchups against those guards. I think you have to keep an eye on Gray Zabel and Anthony Bradford, especially at left and right guard, to see how often they're isolated on Williams, on Barmore, even on those depth guys. How often can they win those one-on-one matchups? Because if New England gets Seattle in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations and they're winning early downs, this is a real problem just with the way that New England schemes it up, and they're also very good on the inside. Interior pressure is something that has been known to bother Sam Darnold in the past. I think this is the biggest advantage New England has in this game. If they can succeed on early downs, especially against the run, like we mentioned, then you unleash those interior pass rushers. You get in these wide defensive fronts that isolate guards, and you really cause Darnold problems up front. I think that's the biggest factor in Seattle wanting to stay in good down and distance situations. Do not let Milton Williams especially take this football game over.
On paper, I don't think there's a lot of areas where New England is better than Seattle. And I think that that's evident by them being favored by 4.5 in this game, and with the over-under total being as low as it is. Like, I think that Seattle is the best team in the NFL. Now, that doesn't mean that they are 100% going to win this game, but there's not many areas where if you're New England, you go, yes, we have an advantage here. Their interior defensive line versus the interior offensive line of the Seahawks is one of those that if you are a Patriots fan, you have to be praying that shows up big time with Milton Williams, with Christian Barmore, with all of the guys that you mentioned. And I think you talked about, their success on early downs mattering a lot towards not getting in those third and long situations. I absolutely agree with you. I also think that it's pretty paramount that Seattle does what they have done all season long, and that is start hot. They are the only team in the NFL that averages more than a touchdown per first quarter throughout the entire season. Darnold, when you're talking about week 18 and the playoffs, he has just one turnover-worthy play total. So you remember that week 18 game, that was against the Niners. That was win, you get the 1 seed. It was win, and it goes through Seattle. Like that's a big pressure game, which is what we needed to judge Sam Darnold off of, especially going to last year when he had a great regular season and then a terrible last 2 games with the Vikings. So if you include that week 18 game, and then obviously win or go home when you get in the playoffs, one turnover-worthy play from Sam Darnold in that time span. He also has 3 big-time throws and a 70.4 passing grade in the first quarter, specifically when you combine that week 18 game with what they've been able to do during the playoffs. If they're able to, Dalton, score on their opening possession, whether they are responding to New England or not, if they're able to score on their opening possession, I really think that this is going to be a long day at the office for the Patriots. It doesn't mean that we can just cancel the game right there and hand the Seahawks the trophy. But if Sam Darnold is able to come out of the gate, not show a ton of nerves, and if Clint Kubiak's able to keep things rolling as the offensive coordinator and play caller, and they're able to score a touchdown on their first drive, I just think that the win probability for the Patriots goes down so much, because it will, especially if they also don't score on their first possession. Like if Seattle, if we're 2 possessions into this game, 1 for each team, and Seattle's up 7-0, that just puts New England so far behind the 8 ball in terms of the potential script in this game that will go in favor of how the Seahawks want to play it, and that will then only multiply in the drives that follow if New England's not able to tie up the game and maybe even get ahead after a couple of possessions after that. So you talked about just the series script of not getting in those third long situations. I think the scoreboard script as well is really important for this game. Starting off hot, being able to put points on the scoreboard like Seattle's been able to do all season long.
No, I agree with that. I think the other factor here is Jackson Smith-Njigba. I just want to throw some numbers out at you as far as how good and how well-rounded he is, because something that several people have asked me, they're like, how does New England handle Smith-Njigba? Do you shadow Gonzalez? Is it double coverage? Is it zone coverage? How do you go about it? And at this point, he's so good at everything, and Clint Kubiak is so good at moving him around formations that I don't really know what the answer is at this point. This guy's a freak of nature, and he can win from anywhere on the field. Here's what I mean by that, all right? He's first in deep receiving grade. All right, 20-plus yards. He's first in intermediate receiving grade, 10 to 19 yards. He's 12th in short receiving grade from 0 to 9 yards. He and Puka Nacua are the only guys in the top 12 of all three categories, right? When he lines up on the outside, he has the second best receiving grade in football. When he lines up in the slot, he has the third best receiving grade in football. And the biggest one for me, 90.4 receiving grade when he's put in motion pre-snap. That's the third best in football as well. So Clint Kubiak can use him from any square inch of the field. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the guy that is keeping Mike Vrabel and Zach Kerr, their defensive coordinator, New England's defensive coordinator, up at night for this 2-week stretch. How in the world do you contain him? You've got to have multiple sets of eyes on him at all times, and even then, Clint Kubiak has become a master of setting Smith-Njigba up for success pre-snap through the formations and reading coverages. I'm telling you right now, if you throw Seattle the same coverage 2, 3, 4 plays in a row, they're going to find a way for Smith-Njigba specifically to exploit that. You have to be able to prevent this guy from going for 150 plus, or you're in for a long game.
I think it's a very good call and a great shout out. I remember looking at some player bets earlier this week, or maybe it was the end of last week, and Smith-Njigba to get over 150 receiving yards was something like plus 450, which is a lot lower than it probably should for a player to get 150 receiving yards. Now, obviously, he got it last week. I think he had 153 against the Rams, and so that sort of is built into the price that he just did that against a really good opponent. But Dalton, I looked it up. If Smith-Njigba gets 150 receiving yards, he's top 8 all time for a single game receiving total in the Super Bowl. So that being only plus 450 or plus 500, like whatever it is now, that was wild to me. That this guy has been so good this year that it's only plus 450, plus 500 for him to record a top 8 single game receiving mark ever in the Super Bowl. That's another piece of evidence onto the year that Jackson Smith-Njigba has had. Final score predictions. Final score prediction of the season here for you. What do you got, Dalton? The Seahawks are favored by 4.5. The line, the over-under, is 45.5. What is your final score prediction? Who you got winning?
I do think it's going to be a close game. I do think we have two defenses that are playing their best football of the year. I think Seattle might have the best defense in football between them and Houston. I think New England has proven they've got at least the top 5 or 6 unit with the way they've played down the stretch and into the postseason. I think you're getting a low-scoring game. I think you're getting a bit of a fist fight. And I even think Mike Vrabel is going to take a page out of Bill Belichick's book. We've seen in so many Patriots Super Bowls under Bill Belichick that he's played it very close to the vest, especially early in games, right? Don't give up explosive plays. Punt the ball away on offense if you have to. Play field position. I've got Seattle winning, though. I think they're a little more well-rounded. I don't like the way that New England's offense is played in the postseason. I think it could be a little bit better, but this is a task to try to improve against this Seattle defense. And keep in mind the special teams battle. New England and Seattle both very good on special teams, but I would argue the Seahawks are the best special teams unit in football, especially with Rashid Shaheed returning kicks. And in a bit of symbolism, we're getting revenge for the Super Bowl 49, that ended the 2014 season. I've got Seattle 20, New England 14.
I've got Seattle winning this game as well, and I think they win by a little bit more. I was kind of just trying to have the game play out in my head for a score prediction. I came up with 24-13 as the final score here for the Seattle Seahawks, and an 11-point victory does seem like a lot, but what I'm really thinking could happen in this game is I think Seattle could go up early. I think they could control most of this game. And then the reason I almost went with like a 24-16 or something like that. But I think the game script will force the Patriots into not taking field goals. I think that they will feel as though they've got to go for it and be more aggressive to try to keep pace and try to get to match them on the scoreboard. And ultimately, I just think that Seattle's defense is too good for that. So I think that it's a little bit more evenly matched with these teams than maybe the final score that I'm saying of 24-13. But I do feel like Seattle is the best team in the NFL. I think they're also the hottest team in the NFL. They're playing unbelievable in all three phases. And I think that they are going to be Super Bowl champions in the end. Anything else on this matchup before we wrap it up and get out of here, Dalton?
I'm going Jackson Smith-Njigba as my MVP for the game. Who you got?
I think the obvious answer is Darnold, certainly for us predicting that the Seahawks are going to win. However, if I was placing a bet, which I have, I'd have a little bit more fun with it. I like the Jackson Smith-Njigba call. I really do. I think he's around like plus 550, plus 600 to win MVP. But what I really like is Rashid Shaheed at plus 4,500 to potentially win MVP. And here's the reason why. Because I think that if a quarterback isn't going to win this game, and unless Jackson Smith-Njigba does have over 150 receiving yards or something like that, I think that moments will define this game and who potentially wins MVP if it's not going to go to one of these quarterbacks. You talked about Seattle having one of the best special teams in the NFL. We've already seen Rashid Shaheed be a big-time special teams returner for them. There's potential for him to be that again in this game. And then he really only has to catch one bomb of a pass, 50, 60 yards in the second half, whatever it is, for people to remember how much his presence meant in this game. So the obvious answer is the ones with the best odds. Drake May, Sam Darnold. I would go with Sam Darnold. I don't hate the JSN MVP call there by you, but the long shot that I actually do like the most is Rashid Shaheed, because that number is a little too juicy to me. So I would probably go with one of those two wide receivers as my favorite bet.
The Shaheed call is interesting because you're traumatizing Patriot fans. It kind of reminds of when Desmond Howard won the Super Bowl MVP for the Packers against New England in Brett Favre's only Super Bowl win. Kind of interesting you went there.
I didn't mean that, but
you've done it. Now you brought it up, Trev. Now you brought it up. See what you did.
Now I brought it up. We appreciate you guys watching every single preview show that we have had this entire season. It's always a blast to go through all of these games with you guys, have a lot of fun with the chat, have a lot of fun going back and forth with the comments. I'm excited that we have this final game and this matchup that we get to watch on Sunday. We would love for you guys to hang out with us on Sunday as we go through our watch along. It'll be right here on the PFF YouTube channel. You guys can watch this game and react to all the craziness in real time with us, and that'll be a lot of fun. And then, of course, we'll have the Super Bowl grade release and review show that we will do the following day as well. So make sure that you guys are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of that. For everybody behind the glass producing the show, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you for watching another episode of the PFF NFL show. We will see you guys on Sunday for the big game in the live stream. We'll see you then.